Eventually, I can just stand up here and could talk to you for 2 hours. I don't get that much time. But, yeah. So yeah. I was making a point, I kind of lost it. Yeah. It also takes copious amounts of time. It's not measured in seconds. It's not measured even in months. It's measured in years of it. It's just a long thing. It's like trying to rush a tree's growth. It really can't. It's a tree. All right, so anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, I'd like to do another exercise. Okay, this is about learning problems and how with autistic kids we have problems with learning. I want you, okay, so, sir, no, there's little sentences up there. Okay, just up with this. Click here to enable face recognition. Simple enough, right? Unless, of course, you can't read from back there. That would be a problem. But really, my point is, reading it, it's okay, right? All right, now, here's how it is with with learning problems. Try reading that. It's in Chinese. Reading it in Chinese, you have to think it in Russian, and then you have to talk to Japanese people about it. See what I'm getting at? It's just like, it seems like it can't be done. It's too difficult. That's what pretty much goes through my mind sometimes when I'm looking at the circumference of a circle with a triangle in the middle of it. I'm just like, I don't know anything. But yeah, it's pretty much how it's a problem. Like, there's just learning styles that just don't work, and then there are learning styles that do work. Like, with me, the best way I work is if someone just helps me step by step, helps me do it, and not just read it. The problem with just looking at it and trying to do it myself is I wasn't learning. I was just becoming frustrated. So it was like with Paris Gibson in Great Falls High. I went for Great Falls High, and that was a disaster. I had to sit there, like at a lecture, just sit there, watching my teacher yammer on about Lord knows what, and I'm trying to listen, like maybe it's something to do with the revolution or whatever. I'm just totally lost. So then I went to Paris, where they would have to yammer on just so I get it across everybody, but then they would go through it with you and then help me with it, help me write it down, help me however it took. It molded to the way I learned, so that eventually that Chinese, Russian, Japanese weird thing eventually was back to English. It's fighting me, I swear. That's its way of saying, I'm done. Okay, next. All right, where am I? All right, taking things literally. This was a big thing. Taking things like, okay, say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Okay, logically, you sit there and think, why would I look in a horse's mouth? It's probably disgusting. It probably doesn't brush its teeth. It smells bad. And there's like all these logical things like, oh, what is in reality? Now, I'm pretty sure what they mean when someone says, don't look a gift horse in the mouth is, don't like, if you get a gift, don't just go, I didn't want this. Even though it really, sometimes you want to say that, you don't say that. But my point is, like, I have to learn what things mean, like metaphors were a big one. Figures of speeches, and just like, I would get lost with what people say because I would analyze all the word structure rather than the meaning behind it. And so, wow, I got lost. Metaphor.
Logic. Taking things literally.
I know, I was going somewhere with that. Okay. I think you get my point. I think I get my point. I really don't. Give me a second. Okay. So, like, taking things too literally would be hard. So I had to learn that things weren't always what they seemed. They didn't mean what they always meant. Because my mind was black and white, rigid, and you meant what you said what you meant. Even though people really don't say what they mean all the time, especially when you're in an argument. Tend to say things you don't mean. But if I were to I used to take those, like, if we have an argument, I would take it to heart and then just take it as is rather than thinking what they're thinking. Pretty much it's a lesson in empathy, like, or you put them in put yourself in their place, and then so you know what they're talking about. Okay, don't subject. I don't want to say. Okay, here is just a big one that here's the number one thing that gets criticism from regular people. Now, I don't know the definition of regular, but close enough. Okay, so anyway, compulsive behaviors. Oh, that's just a fun one, because you have strange things. Like maybe for some reason someone has to knock on something, or they just collect trains, or just stuff like that, just because they want to, or because they feel a need to. Like every time I finish a sentence, I sit down and stand up and then clap. I don't know why anyone would do that, but that's one of the examples of compulsive behaviors. And so I found, like, I collected trains, and it's okay. I mean, everybody has a hobby. The problem is compulsive behaviors can get problematic as you get older. What goes from collecting trains can become an obsession with trains, can become like hoarding, or you just shut everybody out socially. You are all about what you do and what you think. And so eventually you just seclude yourself, and it's really sad because it's just not fun to do. Is my time up? No. Okay. I was about to have a heart attack. So that's another metaphor. Like, oh my gosh, you're going to die right there? No, it just means like you scared me and I was a little worried for a second. You get my point. Okay, anyway, back to what I was originally talking about. Compulsive behaviors get problematic. Like, they can interfere with your life, like how you function, or like with stuff like that, yeah. So it's a really big problem when you're trying to talk to someone and you keep doing this because you feel a need to. And eventually the person stops looking here. They start looking here because like, what are you doing? And then it's like snapping. It's like, well, stop it. I'm like, no. And then you just go like that. No, I don't know how many you snap. Yeah. All right. So, wait, I'm not doing that.
Jordan, can you end with sensory? I know.
It's our favorite.
Can I end with, really? She wasn't listening.
Very good sensory.
I know.
Yep.
I already did sensory. See, even this guy agrees with me. Okay. Can I please just make
What do I
two
know?
more super quick points?
Okay, you do your super
All right.
point.
All right. Physical contact. I don't know if you know this, but this doesn't work in autistic kids. So, like maybe, like if I were to go up to someone, just tap them on the shoulder, or just not talk to them, or just like for whatever reason, my fight or flight would just go over the edge and I would just lose it. Okay, I learned eventually that it's okay. They don't mean to hurt you usually. Unless they look like they're going to hurt you, then you really do need to look. The way I worked through that was I would relax and think happy thoughts. And remember that they're not trying to hurt you. They're just making, because it's natural for a human to make physical contact, right? It's natural to shake someone's hand. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. All right, the last thing I want to say, man, I wouldn't want to do another exercise. You just want to do another. No, you did that. First late appointments, and now he's cutting my speeches short. All right. The last thing I want to say is working with autistic kids. Name a profession harder than working with an autistic kid.
Being their mom.
Of course, it also falls under the category, but that was really good. But yeah, like, see, can you think of anything? Rocket science, it's easy. It just takes this side of the brain. Working with autistic kids, take both sides of the brain and everything else you got. All right, so the thing with autistic kids is just like, this is just a bit of reassurance, simply because working with autistic kids is really hard. Even if I'm autistic and I'm working with another autistic kid, and even I find it hard. I don't just, oh my goodness. Okay, so I like to say first is, It's not seconds. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't measure in seconds. It doesn't measure in days, not weeks, not months. It's measured in years. It took me 5 years to get to the point where I can stand up here and talk to you. Even with somebody cutting me short, I can still talk to you. All right. I just have to say patience is not only a virtue, it's also vital to success and survival.
I don't need the mic.
No. Well, actually, I may want to take this home.
That was my son. I'm so proud. Honestly, 5 years ago, like Jordan was saying, there's no way that I thought that he could stand up here, or I would even stand up here and talk to anybody about living with Asperger's in our house. When he was 2, he kept going to the comas. That was terrible because he has metabolic conditions. So we kind of were behind the 8 ball on the autistic scale. He was in and out of Seattle Children's a lot with ketotic hypoglycemia and hereditary fructose intolerance. And if you know about autistic kids, most of the time they have dietary issues too to go with them, right? Those were fun. He'd get an ear infection, quit eating. His blood sugars would crash, right? And then so his ketones would go sky high, and he would end up in the hospital. And I'd walk in the ER and I'd be like, he's not moving. He's breathing. And they go, well, what did you do? Are you feeding them? And I'd be like, really? Look at me. I mean, come on. So that was really frustrating. So about 4 years old, we got all of that balanced out and taken care of. And then I started noticing I noticed little weird things, but really, he's like a little chicken. He would lay on his trains. He'd have all of them, like he was talking about how he collected everything. So he'd have his little trains underneath him while he slept, and I'd be like, well, that's interesting. Okay. That wasn't the weirdest thing. He'd climb up on the counter in the kitchen, then onto the refrigerator and jump off. You know, once I get the boy doing that, okay? I don't know how many times you can do that, but that was like an aerobic workout for me for a week because he was up and down and up and down and up, over and over. We had 2 swing sets in our backyard and a swimming pool when we were out there.
I grew frogs in that swimming pool.
Yeah, I'm telling you. We had a trampoline. I was blessed enough, and Todd and I, we both worked at St. Joseph Hospital in Bellingham, Washington, and I actually coordinated the rehab department at a 420-bed unit. So I worked with OTPTs and speech therapists. We had no idea what we were doing. He was so well-spoken, Jordan. He had a huge vocabulary, and he was very gifted, and yet he was delayed. And I knew he was delayed. He'd be at recess time, they'd say, go line up at the door. And he'd like, run into all kids. Look, that's him right, literally. I just always wanted to do that to Brad. But that's how, that there's no, he didn't know he was running into people. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're gonna knock your grandma over one day. It was horrible. And so I knew in my gut something was wrong. We had him tested. They're like, oh no, he'll grow out of it. He's just a boy. He didn't write till he was 10 years old. And I mean, right, so we could almost read it. And I remember getting a call at work one day, and we had those big columns at the hospital, and my friend had put a paper up, his occupational therapist, and he finally wrote on that. He's 10 years old in 5th grade, and he called me, Mom, I can read what I wrote. And I was like, yeah! Telling my friends at work, and they're like, oh, how old is he? And I'm like, 10. Yes! So, I mean, there were delays, and I was going, okay, but we were making it through. He had OT at school, he had PT at school, and he had speech at school. And yes, he was in Title I, and he was in extra help, right? But nobody would say, this kid's autistic. Okay, then we had puberty. Yeah. I hear that, yeah. How many of y'all have puberty in your house with Asperger's? Oh, bless you. Because I don't know what happens. Puberty's hard enough when their hormones hit. But when you get them when they're already, like he said, the whole face recognition thing, he's struggled with that. And then that aggression that comes on, and they don't know what to do with that. They're already on sensory overload, and thank you, Jesus. You get more sensory overload, right? Because he's a boy. And I'm telling you, 5 years ago when we were pinning him to the floor, And that's, by the way, he has a dad. That's my husband Todd back there. Yeah. And when he was putting into the floor, because Jordan was really strong, and just out of control in his rage.